Hi, my name is Michael Waits, and welcome back to Insurance for the New Possible, a Chubb conversation. Let's welcome Alex Blake, a Senior Vice President and the Global Head of Travel Insurance at Chubb, and Mike Szucs, the CEO of Cebu Pacific. Okay, gentlemen, let's talk about the airline industry today. Thanks for coming and doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
It's my complete pleasure. Mike, let's start with you. What are some of the most important emerging trends in Asia and in the Philippines in particular, actually, because I think it's an interesting market? And what is Cebu Pacific doing to kind of take advantage of these or participate in it?
Well, I think we're through pretty much the COVID period, which thank goodness for that, which in the Philippines was one of those places that was really adversely affected, particularly on the travel. And I think we're back to where we were. And in terms of Cebu Pacific, I think it's the importance of the airline and what that means to the Philippines. Fundamentally, we're an archipelago, 115 million people. It's growing. Public transportation or other means of public transportation, modes of public transportation aren't necessarily there. So the airline is hugely important, and we're continuing to see the growth now. Demand is picking up on the domestic side. We've now not just reinstated domestic capacity, but we're now at about 110% of where we were pre-COVID. So domestic capacity is through where it was, which gives a sense of, the demand is there, but also its fundamental importance to the Philippines. And it's not just the domestic, it's on the international side as well. Prior to this conversation, you and I were talking about the importance of the overseas Filipino workers. And of course, we serve a number of those markets, even as far as Dubai. So the international market is picking up as well. It's good to see that the Philippines is back, I think, on the treadmill overall of, churning out GDP growth of sort of 6% per annum. It's a good place to be, and the airline's very much an important part of the infrastructure of the Philippines.
Do you want to talk a little bit about tech as well? Like what type of tech innovations are being imbued into airlines too? And how does that work with partnerships as well?
Well, I think we've all been on this digitalization sort of path, and I think in many ways, and certainly for Cebu Pacific, it was accelerated for us as we went into the pandemic, because we had to look at ways of sort of making things even more contactless, more self-service, and actually fundamentally trying to reduce costs as well, but making it easier for the consumer at the same time. And so we've done big investments on that in terms of our front-end apps and website, but also making sure that links in with the experience in the airports as well. So I
want to talk about that too, right?
Yeah.
And we'll get to this, I think, as we get further into this conversation. But there is this idea of this seamless and frictionless experience, right?
Yeah.
I want from the moment I walk in to the moment I get off the plane in my destination, whether it's domestic or international.
Yeah.
I think everybody wants it to just be easier, and I want to talk about that too, because taking complexity and turning it into simplicity is hard. Alex, I want to come to you as well and talk about, with all this technology that's being used, right, and all the information that we have, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you work together with partners to use data, do analytics, to make the experience better and more interesting and more fun, actually, for their clients.
Well, I think that there is a significant opportunity to use data. There are reams of data. We were at dinner last night with our common tech partner, and we were talking just about how much data they have and how much data an organization like Cebu Pacific has. And it's being used to an extent. I look at it from an insurance perspective. We're using it to an extent, but the opportunity to expand that is significant, right? So we have recently launched optimization initiatives that leverage data and analytics that give us deep insights, for example, into what customer segments tend to convert better than others, and that informs us about strategies to really target non-performing segments and turn those people into converters. And all of that leverages data, but the opportunity to do that and to be more personalized and to deliver offers that are more relevant to customers, I think, there's a lot of runway for that.
No, I agree. I mean, we were chatting last night. I mean, an example would be if you're offering some sort of travel disruption insurance. Now, if you're flying to a certain part of the world at a certain time of the year, it's going to be different than if you go at another time of the year, because the weather systems are going to be very, very different. I mean, if you're flying around in India in the monsoon,
right,
the chances of disruption are going to be considerably different to another time of the year. And I think these are things that can be factored in to make sure that you're pricing dynamically or appropriately for not just the route that you're on, but also the time of the year. Or the time of day, even.
Absolutely.
Is there a way because I travel a lot, and I'm sure you both travel a lot as well. There's nothing that makes me happier when I get on the plane if one of the cabin crew remembers me. Do you know what I mean? Or even when I check in, is there a way to use data and analytics and all the information that you have to create a really personalized experience? Because this is something we talk about in every other industry, and I'm curious from an airline standpoint if something you think about.
Well, I think some airlines do that already. I mean, if you look at some of always linked generally to the frequent flyer programs. So if you're getting on a business class seat with, one of the legacy carriers, they'll probably know who you are.
I'm not doing that, just so you know.
No. We're a low-cost carrier, and for us, though, I think we can get to the point that we do know who our customer is now, and we can get that information to the cabin crew. We're not at the extent where we've got the cabin crew going, hey, nice to see you again.
Sure.
Would you like a gin and tonic, the same one that you had before? That's not where we're at. But
it's also not the kind of airline that Cebu Pacific is necessarily, right?
No, indeed. But I think knowing about the customer is the fundamental thing.
Exactly.
There's no reason with technology that we can't have that same level of information, or the relevant information, the one that's relevant to us, just because we're a low-cost carrier. The digital bit doesn't care whether you're a low-cost carrier or a legacy
That's the point
carrier.
I was trying to make, right? In other words, it doesn't have to be the gin and tonic, to be fair. And I love the example, by the way. But if I book myself, right, because at some level, everyone's become their own travel agent. If I book myself, I always sit in the same seat. I don't even know why, right? And whether it's I always fly in a low-cost carrier anyway. So why not just suggest that seat to me anyway?
Well, no,
kind of thing.
That I think is coming, right?
Yeah.
And so it would be that, if you're we have many frequent flyers. You're a frequent flyer with Cebu Pacific, and you always pick the overwing exit on the aisle. Then when you come to your seat selection, it pre-populates it for you. Now, why wouldn't it do that?
Right.
I mean, and that is absolutely something that can be, in the booking flow, and we can adapt.
Can you talk as well about, in this context, right, how the insurance experience itself just makes people feel better, feel like it's also being personalized, but it's just a better customer experience?
Sure. Well, look, I think the bottom line is that people invest in trips, and there's
a great phrase, actually. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so they invest in travel, right? It's something that people save for, right? And it's something that that people like to do, and they want that to be protected, that investment. So that is one thing that travel insurance does. And of course, it also adds peace of mind. Once somebody leaves their home country, their medical insurance doesn't cover them any longer. And so that's really, from an international travel perspective, a big driver of demand for the product, right? I do think, right, and we were discussing this yesterday in terms of new product concepts and so forth, there is room for us to improve the way that we deliver products, creating new products that are more relevant to customers. And we want to work with partners like Cebu Pacific in order to do that, certainly.
So talk to me about this. How do you go through that new product creation process? And then how do you work together with others to do it? Again, because before, it was always in a vacuum. You're doing it alone, but now you can work with others to do it.
Well, I think the LCCs, perhaps more so than others, I mean, they've always worked with partners. I mean, LCCs like to be core airlines. We sort of say we'll focus on the airline bit. All the other stuff we'll leave to the people that know what they're doing. Which is why in the case of Chubb, let's go and talk to them. What we will know is that we would like to offer our customers a travel insurance sort of policy that is relevant not only for Cebu Pacific but also for that customer and the destination where they're going to. Now that might be slightly different depending on the destination they're going to. It also might mean we've got customers in the Philippines, but we've got customers who are from Japan, from Thailand, elsewhere.
Absolutely.
And the product's got to be relevant there. So the first thing we've got to do is design the product. The digital bit is another element in itself. That's about the ease of obtaining it, about the ease of the transaction. And then about the ease, if you do need to make a claim, about the ease of making a claim. Nobody wants to fill in 50 forms and 15 phone calls and everything else. So those are the things we've got to work on. But get the product relevant first. And that's, of course, working with the colleagues like Alex and making sure we've got that right. Then we work on how do we execute that? How do we put it into the booking flow so it's very visible, it's easy to purchase? And, of course, working as well with Alex and Chubb to make sure that if they do want to make a claim, it's relatively straightforward.
And this is for both of you, actually, right? Because I think I'm going to make the presumption that we're all kind of the same age. But during the time that we...
Sure, I'll be honest. I must be.
We can bet on this, actually. I bet you and I are exactly the same age, but we can bet on this. But I've seen a lot of technology changes over time. And even when I was sitting on a trading desk or in my current job, I see tech change, and I still have to keep up with what that change is. We did a lot of work in the old days at taking a legacy system and adapting it and then losing it to use modernized technology. Do you both see opportunities when you're going just through your day-to-day thinking, oh, we just implemented this new tech. Now we can do the things we've always wanted to do? Does that make sense?
No, I think it does, and I think, but just going back to the tech and just going back to the point earlier, I mean, we don't want to build a lot of tech. We want to buy solutions that are already there.
But it still gives you the opportunity to say we've wanted to. It gives us the
opportunity. If you look at the way we want to do our tech, is we want to be very good integrators. I mean, we need to have a fundamental sort of backbone to our systems.
That's this thing, yeah?
Yeah, that can integrate various solutions. Which could be plugging into insurance, could be a whole host of different software applications or product applications that can plug in. And that's where we have to design our architecture at. We do not want to be going and building products, because that product that we build for today might not be relevant in 2 years' time. So what do I do with that team?
But that's the flexibility we were talking about before. And I love this as an idea, right? Same thing, right?
Well, we're in a little bit of a different position because we do own the tech, right? You know, and we provide the tech to customers like Cebu Pacific. And, you know, it is a process of constant reinvention on the tech side. And, you know, that takes a lot of thinking, takes investment, right? It has to be factored into the way that you run your business, right? We sort of started up travel here at Chubb back in 2009, and we built tech that at the time was
unbelievable,
super cutting edge, best in the industry, but very quickly, right, others caught up. You know, the advent of insurtechs and so forth, you know, has come in, and they come with good tech, right? And so we've got to constantly be reinventing and repositioning ourselves to make sure that we can compete with that. Because at the end of the day, right, as much as we are providers of products that take care of customers, Cebu Pacific, of course, flies millions of customers across the Philippines and the globe. But we have to, you know, this is a tech-driven business at the end of the day, right? You know, you talked about using the pandemic to digitize even further and to create those experiences. We've talked about customers and what customers expect. And they're going to expect more. You know, perhaps I'm not going to get on a Cebu flight and get a gin and tonic, right? But being able to have Cebu know what seat I usually choose is pretty cheap, but it's a good customer experience, and it's going to become something that customers expect. And on the insurance side, we have to be there too, right?
So I want to make this point as well. You said back in 2009, you built tech that you thought was great, and it was. I was there. I mean, not there, but I mean, I was building unbelievable tech in 2009, which today we wouldn't use. But this is why I really want to have this conversation, to understand, and I want to make an analogy here. You want to focus on your core. The core is making that plane experience, the travel experience, as amazing as possible. And you want to focus on your core, building the best insurance products you possibly can, and then combining them together. But the planes change, the tech changes. Your job is to make sure that you can see what the new tech can bring, and that you can take the planes and make them better configured, more efficient, all that kind of stuff. And if you can work together to make that work, that's kind of magic, right? And I want to ask you, sorry, did you want to say something?
I think a good partnership is about that, right? You know, we cannot stand still. We've been partners with Cebu Pacific now. I think we launched in 2019. And again, we're not just going to do the same thing that we've done for the last 5 years and expect that that's just going to continue to be successful. We have to be reinventing, adding value, and we appreciate having partners like Cebu that come to us and say, this is something that we're seeing, this is something that we're interested in, can we do something together, right? That's what it's about, right?
You mentioned that you were 110% of capacity that you were pre-pandemic.
On domestic, yeah.
On domestic,
International's now at about 100%. By the way, it's been damned hard to get there. Really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said this before we started recording. I think nobody really wants to talk about this anymore. But that whole experience has fundamentally changed. Like, I'm actually getting a little bit of a chill, but it's fundamentally changed, like the way we do business and the way we lead our lives. And even though it's in the rearview mirror, it's impossible not to think about it and the impact that it's had. I want to talk about if implementing new tech is kind of like getting a new plane. And if you're 110% capacity, you can't just like, it's not like a tech solution where you just like plug in a new server. You have to have more planes. So you're expanding on the plane side.
We are expanding.
When you do that, do you change the way you internally configure those planes as well? Again, to make it more efficient and better for a better experience for the customers.
No, I mean, well, first of all, we want to have as much commonality as we can on the
Sure.
planes. That's because these are expensive assets.
Oh yeah,
that
if
we'll
this
have
comes
for a
in
long
and this
period
comes
of
in,
time.
you want it to be easy to handle, right?
Yeah. You don't have the. I mean, tech. We talk about being agile and you can roll something out every 6 minutes or something like that. I mean, with a plane. I mean, we're currently looking at a plane order at the moment for 100 aircraft or so. And
Right.
But this is an order that will come. First aircraft would start coming in 2027. So the lead time of your thinking on aircraft assets is massive. But going back to your point about where things are from the pandemic and where we are now and why it's been so hard is the industry went to sleep for about 2.5 years. So lots of people, I'm not saying people forgot what they were doing, but lots of people left the industry, so you have to bring people back. Yeah. There's a whole load of training, and you're seeing this with the OEMs, so with the Boeings, the Airbus, the engine manufacturers, they've all got their issues. Now, at the end of the day, the people who have to try and put all this together and then make it work for a wonderful customer experience is the airline. Yeah, but there are so many things that kind of like problems that had built up during the pandemic that are now being washed through. So the quality experience is now improving. But we've had to put more contingencies in place than we ever had to, just to make sure that we deliver the customer experience.
What does that mean? I mean, I know what a contingency is, but what does that mean? You have to put more contingencies.
Well,
is this in case something else happens?
Yeah, so for example, I mean, if we talk about one of the specifics at the minute, which is the issue on Pratt & Whitney engines, we currently have 10 aircraft that are grounded because, along with a lot of operators on Pratt & Whitney, 10 aircraft are grounded. Now, there's a bit more predictability about it now, but last year there was less predictability, and you were caught short. All of a sudden, aircraft on the ground. Oh, hang on a sec, somebody wants to fly to Tokyo, but I don't have an aircraft anymore. So what do you do? One of the things you do is you put in more contingency. You have more standby aircraft. I mean, so that's one of the things that we've done. But also, we've had to adapt ourselves and improve in terms of how do we handle customers when there is disruption. We hope it never happens.
Sure.
But some stuff is beyond our control. I mean, it could be weather related. But where we can put in contingencies, sensible contingencies, we have done so.
Do you want to talk about where insurance fits into that whole process? Because if they're building contingencies in, this is right up your alley.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it fits in terms of how customers may be disrupted by that, right? And where insurance may play a role in helping customers to, make contingency plans for their travel or change trips or claim if they have to cancel a flight, something to that effect, right? So it is ultimately, I think, Mike, the complexity of, and we were talking about this earlier as well, right? The complexity of running an operation like the one that Mike runs is, pretty staggering at the end of the day. And I think the role that we can play is a small role in that grand scheme of things.
Important role.
In terms of giving the customers peace of mind that, they're going to be okay, right? In the face of this kind of potential disruption, right?
Right. So you're talking about contingencies and this complexity inside the airline. I always kind of like to look behind the curtain. How do you take this really complex situation, this idea that we need to plan for these contingencies, that you're working with a bunch of partners? Because to me, and again, tell me where I'm wrong, an airline looks like this, particularly an LCC, looks like a platform business where you build this thing and all of the things that you don't consider to be your core competencies, you plug in, right? And this is the thing you're trying to accomplish. But first of all, plugging in all those things is very, very complicated. And what the customers see and what's going on in the background could be two completely different things. Just from a management perspective, how do you manage that complexity into simplicity? And almost as importantly, how do you imbue that ethos into the teams of people that are doing it, right?
Well, look, we want to make it as simple as possible internally. I mean, but let's go back first of all to the customer. For the customer, that we don't want them to know about the complexity. I mean, right? We want them to have as if it's super seamless, super easy, and everything else in every aspect of it. But I mean, in reality, it is that duck paddling on the water, that it looks smooth on top of the water, but frantically kicking underneath. And I don't think you'll ever get away from that from an airline. But you do look to get one. You've got to improve your own ability to make decisions, and that includes using technology, getting data, and making sure as well. I mean, everyone says, "Oh, data's the answer, technology's the answer," but you've got to have good people. I mean, you know, maybe we'll all be replaced by artificial intelligence at some point in time.
Not going to happen.
But you do need good people to make decisions, or get groups of people together that can actually come up with right decisions. Because when things are going on, it's sitting still and doing nothing is more often than not is not the answer.
Yeah,
so you've got to move forward.
Answer.
Yeah. So look, I think, I mean, we talk a lot about technology, but I can't underemphasize the importance of taking your people there, letting them understand, and training them, and by the way, bringing in some new talent. I mean, you do occasionally, as you go through learning experience, you say, well, I can teach that to myself. But also, you know, in the last 18 months or so, we brought in some additional new talent from outside.
You sound really excited about this, by the way.
I put on a good front, maybe. I don't know whether
but seriously,
I'm very passionate about the industry and about doing a good job.
Yeah, but I mean, I always say that, like, well-educated, well-meaning people can be good at anything they try. But to really be great at something, you have to care about it. And I can feel it actually in both of your voices, like you care. Otherwise, you can't get that excited about it.
It hurts when we see that we've got a disruption and our passengers are affected. And you sort of sit there, you get the text messages, you follow it, and you know you've got a team on it, but you're sort of sitting there and you're going, come on, we want these people to get to where they want to go as soon as possible.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's nothing worse than being in Dubai, wanting to get home for Christmas, which is maybe the only time you get home, and having some disruption, whether it's weather or the engine or anything, right? And in both cases, there are things that both of you are working on to make sure that doesn't happen, for sure.
Or to create better customer experiences in that regard.
Across the board, yeah. Across the board. What are some of the interesting innovations that you're working on that may be under the radar to your potential clients, but that you think could be important going forward? And it can be any part of the business, yeah?
Innovations. Look, I think it's just on this continuous stream to, first of all, make the customer interactions and the service to the customers as good as possible. By the way, this is not about sort of layering in extra products. We want to stay true to our fundamentals. And
that's why I did this thing, yeah?
Yeah, you touched on it earlier, though. I mean, you were talking about, you know, in the Philippines, it might be in the conversation before we had this, started this podcast, but the importance of, you know, low fares to people traveling around the Philippines.
Very important.
I mean, the economy's growing, the population's growing. Everyone's really upbeat about that. But the GDP per capita is relatively low. Price is fundamentally a massive driver. So we've got to keep ourselves very efficient so that we can offer a low price to them. So that ties very much in with the digitalization. The good thing about digitalization, it's self-service. So it's naturally cost saving. So anyone who thinks that if you're an LCC, I'm not going to invest in digitalization, I'm not going to invest in my app, I'm not going to invest in the technology. It's wrong. It's plain wrong, because you want all that, because it's going to give you cost savings at the end of the day. So we'll always look at the innovations there. And what other digitalization or what technologies can improve the efficiency of the core business. As I've said, we're having to add in contingencies that we didn't have to before.
Right? That's what I want to know.
I've got to find new ways, new efficiencies.
Right.
Now, I mean, some better people around, better process we can do internally, but also some technologies are going to help us to do that. So we manage our assets more efficiently. We've got a lot of assets, a lot of very, very expensive assets, and we've got to make sure that we utilize them. We don't make mistakes in terms of we've got an aircraft on the ground when we shouldn't have it on the ground when it's down to us. That's where we've got to sort of eke out those problems.
Do you want to talk about innovations that are under the radar, maybe that people aren't expecting, but that you're working on that are relevant here?
Well, I think we've talked a lot about insurance here. I think generally speaking in the aviation industry, and we do see a lot of this driven by the low-cost carrier base, right? Just implementing things that can drive better self-service and more self-service. You know, these types of experiences that we talk about, you know, from concept to landing, right? There are touch points along the way that I think the industry is improving in terms of how customers interact, not only with Cebu, for example, but with Cebu's partners, and the interaction of all that to create kind of a customer experience. I think that that's improving and will continue to improve.
I don't think what I'm going to say next is controversial at all, but I think the Changi Airport in Singapore, the whole experience is the best experience in the world. Now, I've done a lot of traveling, and I noticed actually when I was at Dam Muang, because I live in Thailand, was it yesterday, 2 days ago, I can't remember anymore, that even at the point where I'm checking in, they're starting to put some of these cameras there. So there's something's going to be implemented there to make that easier. I think in a way, and again, this has nothing to do particularly with insurance or with the airline in per se, but maybe it does, and I just don't know. There's got to be a way to handle the immigration faster, like while you're doing your checking, because you give them your passport. There's going to be a camera there, right? And you can just minimize the time. And again, it's not for you to answer, but it's just something I've been thinking about.
But a key point though, and look, Changi's a fantastic experience in so many ways, and I think it's part of brand Singapore. I think
absolutely
as well. So it's a statement, and I think there's two distinct things here, and I'm sort of be a bit extreme in terms of explaining it, but I think you're absolutely right in terms of the digital experience. You know what we can do in immigration, so people can go through without even touching the side. So it's seamless, it's easy. You don't need a massive waterfall in the middle of your airport. So when we go to other parts of the world, let's focus on all of those bits to make it really efficient.
Right, because you can do that bit that's efficient, but you don't have to have the fanciness around it.
You don't need to have the fanciness around it, which is part of brand Singapore, and it's absolutely wonderful. And of course, they'll say that this adds into ancillary revenue. People come to see it and they eat and everything, and maybe that's true. But there are constraints in other parts of the world. There might not be as much access to capital. There might not be.
I don't need waterfalls, so to be fair. I really don't.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. Technology and getting it super efficient—that's what we want.
Yeah. And actually, that's the waterfalls are nice, right? But at the end of the day, what I want when I have a kind of a travel experience like that is to make it quick, easy, painless. I don't want to sit in an immigration line for an hour. Worst thing is when you get off of an airplane and you're approaching immigration, you see that there's like 1,000 people in line. You're like, oh man, I'm here for a while.
But I make airport specific decisions. When I was flying, when I knew that I had to fly here, I was like, should I check in my bag? Because that's going to add actually no time to my trip. So I just checked it in. Because of the way it's so efficient, and I think technology is one of the things that does that. Can we talk about sustainability? Are you an F1 fan at all?
Yeah, I am an F1 fan. Kind of, I lost faith a little bit after the Lewis and Max thing a few years ago.
Fair enough.
But Fair enough. After about a year, I jumped back into it.
But I think this is a really important issue for airlines in particular, right? Because fuel is a big cost. But if you look at what's happening in the F1 and their idea for sustainability, what is it, 2030, I think is what they're saying, to be net zero. And I don't care that much about net zero per se, but they're also developing new fuels. Are there things to be learned from what's happening there into the fuel that's going to be used in air? And I know that's further out because, like you said, you're ordering planes today. They're going to be delivered in 27. But it's something that airlines think about, particularly LCCs.
Oh, look, all the airlines have to think about it. I mean, and it's, we don't have a choice. We've got to do our bit. I mean, we are only about 2.5% of actually the sort of the global emissions. So, but
it's weird, right? Because the planes are big, but the impact is not as big as other things.
Yeah, but it's growing, and actually, it's going to probably. I mean, it's certainly going to go above 2.5%. One, because the industry's going, but also other parts of the world ecosystem can solve make bigger strides on their carbon footprint more easily than say the airlines can. But we've got to do our stuff. Now the key is ultimately, an alternative fuel. Because these aircraft we're ordering, these might fly for, not with us. Our average age of aircraft is about 5.5 years, so we'll hold on to these for maybe 12 years only, right?
Right.
But these aircraft will fly into into the 2040s, 2050, maybe up to 2050.
Right.
The key is getting an alternative fuel, and that's where all the emphasis is on sustainable aviation fuel. So we've already done some flying with sustainable aviation fuel. We've got some MOUs signed, and so we're into sort of like working with partners to see how we can do this. But the key is, how do you get enough of it and how do you get it cheap enough? Because it's 4 times more expensive.
Today.
Now, if they can increase the production, but I mean, the step change is got to be massive. So I think, there's a lot of statements that come out sort of, we're going to be neutral by this and this. I mean, IATA's now come out and sort of say 2050, which I think is about right.
It's not that far away, to be fair.
Not that far away.
Not in the context of my life.
It seems like a long way for me. But just to be clear, I mean, one of the things we've got to do is we've got to make sure we're efficient in our operations. And when we do fly, we sort of use that asset efficiently from a carbon footprint point of view.
Absolutely.
So You want to have lots of passengers on board the aircraft. You want to have a high load factor, which is what LCCs do. We actually have more seats in our aircraft than most.
But that's what I want to talk about, right? Because it's so efficient.
So it is efficient. So look, we have 459 seats on our A330. I flew from Manila to Singapore yesterday evening. Right, it was virtually every seat was sold. It was well into the 90% seat factor.
Good stuff.
That is. I mean, we always sort of say two things about that aircraft. Well, I should say three. Actually, it's a very comfortable experience, first and foremost. The second point is it is the lowest unit cost seat in the industry, period. But it's also got the lowest carbon footprint per passenger.
By definition, though, right?
In the industry, period.
By definition.
Yeah.
But isn't, so, and again, I can hear the excitement in your voice as well. Isn't there something really neat about having those constraints? Because there are structural issues, right, that you're dealing with that you can't change per se, at least not immediately. But because of those issues, you get to create the most efficient and the least carbon footprint experience in the world. And everybody else is just watching, oh, yeah, we can't do that.
Well,
they can, but they can, but they don't. Yeah.
Well, why they don't, I don't know.
I'm not making that value judgment.
But just going back, I mean, the specific configuration on that aircraft is not one that Airbus came to us and said here's the configuration.
That's the innovation
we went to Airbus and sort of said, look, we've seen this is the layout of your aircraft, and we think you can do this with it. And great on Airbus, they then said, okay, let's work on this.
Do you want other carriers to then go ahead and copy that?
Well, I mean, yeah, fine, absolutely. We can't stop them. I mean, once it's out, it's there. Now, I think we use this particular aircraft, the 330neo. I mean, we use it as much more in short haul than we do actually in long haul. Most people use a 330 in long haul. For us, it's actually a short haul big bus because there's other constraints. There's slot constraints all around Asia, so that's why we use it as well.
I want to make one last point about innovation from my perspective, and then I'll leave the last word to both of you. But I asked you that question about copying because that's easy to do. But because of the environment in which you operate, you have to innovate, right? I'm so glad you brought up this configuration for the 300 Neos, right? Because it's actually a really interesting thing. More seats, lower carbon footprint, most efficient plane that's flying today. Used for domestic short hauls, yeah? Not for long haul. Well, for short hauls.
You can do all. It can do all missions.
You can do all of them, but mostly you said for this. But the thing is that anybody can copy the thing you've already done. But what they can't do is come up with the next innovation because they're not dealing with the same environment you're dealing with. So they're always chasing. And that's actually a really cool environment in which to operate. What's the last thing you want to talk to us about innovation here?
I think we've
covered a lot.
We've covered a lot about it. I wanted to thank Mike for taking the time to spend with us today.
My pleasure.
And for your partnership and faith in Chubb, and look forward to continuing to innovate together.
Was there one last thing you want to say?
No, just thank you for inviting us along on this sort of free and easy conversation about all sorts. We never got quite to talking about Man United, though. But
we didn't. It's the thing I know the least about. Okay, I want to thank both of you, Alex Blake, a senior VP and the global head of travel insurance at Chubb, and Mike Szucs, the CEO of Sabre Pacific. You were both awesome. Thank you both very much.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks very much. Thank you.